So this is my I didn't know I was pregnant story. And you're not going to see it on TLC because I actually found out I was pregnant before I had the baby, unlike most of the people on that show. But there was a little bit of drama during my pregnancy, and um, so you might find it interesting or you might find it boring. So I'll leave it up to you. But I'll give you the background of my medical. I'll give you the beginning. I got married when I was 30. And me and my husband never did do any kind of birth control because we wanted to have kids. And I knew that it was going to be some kind of uphill battle trying to get pregnant from talking to my OBGYN. First off, I was overweight by I weighed 280 pounds at the time. I'm still overweight, but I weigh a lot more now. I'm not going to tell you how much, but you can guess. Um, and second off, I had PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, which, if you are not familiar with, makes it where you don't ovulate often. So that makes it hard to get pregnant. There are medications you can take to make you ovulate, but my OBGYN would not prescribe them because I was overweight and it put me at a higher risk for complications. Now, you can order these medications from Mexico and Europe, but I knew with my luck, because Murphy loves to dance all over my life, I would get some kind of horrible bad sample and I'd end up with liver failure and die. I just knew something like that was going to happen, so I didn't want to take the chance. So basically, my only options were to lose weight to hopefully stimulate ovulation by having less weight and pressure on my ovaries that were not working properly, and to go on birth control, which has been known to stimulate ovulation when you go off of it because of the hormone uh, involved. I didn't want to go on birth control, so I tried to lose weight, which I did lose a little bit. It wasn't a lot, but I did lose some weight. But I still did not get pregnant for 2 years of my marriage. After I got married. So, anyways, long story short, in December of 2009, I missed a period, so I took a pregnancy test and it came back positive. And I was all excited, and I was gonna make an appointment with my doctor and all the other stuff. Well, this was on a Friday that I took the test. I had to wait till Monday to make the appointment, and by Monday, I had a period. So either the pregnancy test was inaccurate, or I have what is called a blighted pregnancy, which is where the egg is fertilized, but and your body starts to produce the hormones needed for the baby to be made, but the egg doesn't connect to the uterus. It is properly, so the body flushes it because it's not going to make a correct baby. It's just and a blighted pregnancy is very, very common, and it's a natural thing that happens to all women. And it's probably the majority of women have had a blighted pregnancy. They just didn't know it because it is so early in the pregnancy that they don't even know they're pregnant, and they just think their period's late or whatever. So anyways, 2 months later, in February, I had a really light period, and then I missed the next one. And so at the end of March, I took another pregnancy test, and it came back negative. So I was like, okay, I must be late. Happens, whatever. And then I missed the next month, and I took another pregnancy test, and that one came back negative. So I was like, well, maybe something's interrupting with my period, and I've always been pretty regular, even though I was overweight. But I did have a history of cyst on my ovary, and when I was 19, I had a cyst rupture on my left ovary, and I did miss a couple of periods because of that. And I thought maybe something like that was going on. So third month came around, and still no period. Took another pregnancy test, still negative. So I was like, and by the time the 5th month rolled around, I was like, okay, something's going on. So I called my primary physician, and made a doctor's appointment. I said, I've missed, 5 months of periods. I have a history of PCOS, history of cysts, yada, yada, yada. I think that maybe that's what's going on. And of course, I went to my primary physician, and of course, the first thing he asked me is, could you be pregnant? And I'm like, well, no, because I've taken 3 pregnancy tests, and they've all come up negative. And he's like, well, did you get blood work done? And I was like, well, no, these were just, over-the-counter cheap pregnancy tests. And he's like, well, you can't be 100% sure unless you get blood work done. Because, you may have bought an expired pregnancy test, which are not 100% accurate. And I was like, oh, okay, which, could have been possible. I did buy these particular pregnancy tests at a aftermarket store. It wasn't a dollar store per se, but it was like a Best Buy type place where not necessarily it could have been a expired pregnancy test. I did not look at the dates. But anyways, I still didn't think I was pregnant. And my doctor was like, well, we'll schedule, we're going to pull your blood and we'll see what comes up, but we're going to schedule you a ultrasound to see if it is a cyst because you do have the history, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I go home and I'm eating dinner, and I get a call from the clinic, and it's my doctor's nurse, and he's like, congratulations, you're pregnant. And I was like, what? He's like, you're pregnant. I was like, that's not possible. I just did not believe it. I had got it into my head that I wasn't going to be able to get pregnant, because it had been 2 years of us with no birth control and nothing besides, the one little blighted pregnancy, which at the time I didn't know that's what it was. I just figured it was a false pregnancy test, a false positive. And I was like, oh my God, that's just, so I was like, I told my husband, he was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have a minion, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, still in complete disbelief. And we went to, he's like, go ahead and keep the sonogram appointment so we can find out how far along you are. And we'll go from there. And you can sign up for an OBGYN doctor, yada, yada, yada. So we go to the sonogram appointment. And apparently my doctor had not changed the order on the sonogram. The original order was to do a search for possible cysts on my ovaries. And that's what the order was when we went to the sonogram. When in truth, we were there to find out how long I was how far along I was. And so the sonogram tech, I will never forget this as long as I live, and the look on her face, she gels up the little wand and she puts it on my belly and then she yanks it off real quick and she's like, "Do you know why you're here today?" And I was like, "Yes, we found out we were pregnant and the doctor wanted to know how far along I was because I'm not sure when I got pregnant." And she was like, "Oh, okay, good, because I can't tell you anything without the doctor being here. And there's no way you would not be able to see a baby on this monitor if you didn't know you were pregnant." And I would get in trouble. And the look on her face was just priceless because this is like complete shock. Anyways, she finishes up and we go home. And she's like, "Do you want to know the sex?" And I was like, "No, I want to be surprised," because, like, our parents were surprised. They didn't have sonograms back there to tell them what the sex was. I just kind of wanted to have that experience that our parents did. Oh, this cat trying to climb in the door. Anyways, that was a mistake, but we'll get into that later. So we went home and we made an appointment with an OBGYN that had been recommended by one of my friends. And we go in and we see him and he's like, "Well, you're 25 weeks pregnant, which means that you're pretty much over halfway done." I was like, "Wow, that's crazy." He's like, "Yeah, that's crazy, but we're lucky in a couple of things. First, your blood work came back great. You're a little bit anemic, so we're going to go ahead and start you on an iron pill." But he's like, and we're going to start you on a prenatal, of course. But we also got lucky because you're Rh negative and you have to have the Rodentrum shot, I think that's how you pronounce it, at 28 weeks. And we didn't miss that window. If we had missed that window, we could have had some really bad consequences if your husband was Rh positive. And if you don't know anything about this, in I think it was the early 30s, it was discovered that women with Rh negative blood type, which is a protein in your blood, Rh. If you have it, you're positive. If you don't have it, you're negative. Anyways, women with Rh negative blood type that have a father with Rh positive blood and the fetus is Rh positive, the body will literally attack that fetus like it's a foreign object, like it's something that's not supposed to be there, and cause you to miscarry, have a stillbirth, or the baby to have complications. Some babies born by Rh negative mothers were called blue babies because they didn't get enough oxygen in their blood in utero. There were women who literally had stillbirth after stillbirth after stillbirth due to the fact that they were Rh negative and their partners were Rh positive, and their bodies attacked the babies like they were like cancer. But anyways, the Rodentrum shot was developed by a man using his own blood, and he's retired now. He no longer donates, but to keep women with Rh negative blood from their bodies from attacking the fetus. And since we didn't know my husband's blood type, although we probably could have typed them, I don't know why they didn't. I guess it's just standard procedure now that anybody with Rh negative blood automatically gets the Rodentrum shot. And so it was lucky that I had found out uh, that I was pregnant before the shot is due, because my body could have fought the fetus if it had been an Rh positive fetus. Now, it ended up me and my daughter was also Rh negative, but that might not have been the case. We didn't know that. So anyways, he's like, well, also, but we do have some bad news. And I was like, really? He's like, yes. On your right ovary is a mass. And it's really strange looking. And there's a possibility that it could be cancer. And I was like, oh my God, really? He's like, yes. He's like, now, I want to send you to an oncologist and have him. And he's like, I'm going to send this, sonogram to an oncologist and have him look at it. And they're going to get with you on what they want you to do from there. And so, that's where we're at. And I was like, wow, okay. So, instantly I'm like happy that I'm pregnant because, it had been so long getting pregnant. And then I'm also thinking, oh my God, I can have cancer. What does that mean for me? What does that mean for the baby? Ugh, so I was like, but anyway, so I get the call from the oncologist and they're like, we're not going to, we want you to have an MRI. And I was like, okay. And then like, now, it's like, there's no radiation, so it's not going to hurt the baby. It's a very detailed image, so we should be able to see really well what this mass looks like and go from there. And I was like, okay. And they're like, so here's your date for your MRI, and you need to get a copy of it from the hospital, and this is the date we want you to come into our office with the CD-ROM. And I was like, okay. So made the appointment for the MRI. I go and I have panic attack because I felt like I was being buried alive. I don't know if any of you have ever had an MRI, but that little tube is freaking not made for fluffy people, especially the one at the hospital where I live, because I live in a rural area. We don't actually have an MRI. Well, we do now, but at the time, we did not have a permanent MRI. We had a portable one that came every so often, and it's smaller, this portable one is, than a normal MRI. So they wheeled my fat ass into this MRI, and I literally could not move. The freaking tube is this far away from your face, and I start panicking. I'm like, pull me out now. And I could not move my arms, nothing. And so the guy pulls me out, and I'm like, calming my breath and everything. And he's like, do you think you're going to be able to do this? And I was like, I don't know. Because, my hands down my side, I literally cannot move. I feel like I'm being buried alive. And I've never been claustrophobic in my life. When I was a kid, I used to make my bunk bed into a little cave and, hide in there and read and stuff. I loved it. And he's like, ugh, yeah, some people get that reaction. He's like, I tell you what, he's like, why don't we try one more time before we reschedule you for an open MRI that has more room for you to move around, because that's going to take a little bit more longer, and we do want to find out these results as fast as we can. Why don't you try putting your arms up above your head, and that way you'll have a little bit more room around here in the tube so you're not feeling it as squished in. And I was like, okay, we'll try that. And that ended up working, along with me singing to myself. I was like, every Girl Scout song I could think of, every church camp song, every hymn, I was singing when I was in that freaking tube to get through the anxiety of the claustrophobia, because it sucked. I've had 3 more MRIs since then. No, 4. Excuse me, 4. And it's never gotten better. In fact, it got worse because I got fatter and therefore took up more room. And I had literally had to do an open MRI on Valium in order to get through 3 of those. It was, anyways. So I go to the oncology, and the oncologist was like, well, good news is we're not going to have to take the baby at 28 weeks, because that's what me and your OB were originally talking about if this was cancer. Yeah. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, but I'm about 80% sure this is not cancer. I think it is a multi-chambered, fluid-filled cyst. It's 16 centimeters, which is the size of a cantaloupe. And we're going to keep a close eye on it, which means every 2 weeks you're going to have an ultrasound. And if it grows or looks like it's going to rupture or does anything different than what it looks like right now, we're going to get you in and get that baby pulled out. And then we'll test it. And if it is cancer, we'll get you on chemotherapy and all the other stuff that we'll talk about it then. But right now, we're going to wait and let that baby develop till it's 35 weeks. Because by then, the baby should have all its organs fully developed. During that last month, the ninth month, really all they do is kind of fatten up. They're pretty much done at 35 weeks. You're just kind of putting on a little bit more fat, developing the digestive system a little bit more, things like that. At 35 weeks, you have a completely viable baby almost 100% of the time. And it's the safest time if you're going to have a premature baby to have one. And I was like, okay, sounds like a good plan. So every 2 weeks, they reassigned me to a high-risk OBGYN. I no longer go into the original one, but going to now one that's high risk because of the cyst. And they also said, oh, you're a little old. Geriatric. Oh my God. Geriatric at 32 years old. But whatever. Anyhow. So yeah, every 2 weeks I'm going in, getting this sonogram, and the high risk OB's like, you know how to grow a baby, Mrs. Meeks, because we're not seeing any kind of complications with the fetus at all. It looks great. Of course, because at the time I still did not know the sex. And keep doing what you're doing. And I gained absolutely no weight in any of this time. I weighed the same weight I did at the beginning of my pregnancy as I did when I delivered the baby. And when they delivered the baby, I had lost 25 pounds. And the so that's one way I didn't know I was pregnant. I did not gain any weight. My boobs did not, you know how they say your boobs get tender and they grow. Nope, didn't have any of that. My boobs stayed the same size. They didn't get tender. Did not have morning sickness. Now, I did get really bad GERD or acid reflux. But before I was pregnant, I had acid reflux. So, but it just wasn't as bad. When I was pregnant with my daughter, I would get one taste of that bile from the acid reflux in my mouth, and it was over. I was puking. And I puked up some really good meals, like freaking amazing Texas barbecue. I was pissed. But besides that, that was the only pregnancy symptom I had before I found out I was pregnant. Now, after I was pregnant, the baby moved around a lot. Felt like a freaking alien moving in there. And when she turned over, it was like, oh, she pressed her feet out on my belly. It would freaking hurt. And my belly got like super hard, even though I was fat. Like my upper belly, I couldn't touch my toes because it was so hard. And, but anyways, so yeah, I went in for my last appointment on October 1st. And the baby was actually due November 25th. So I know I got pregnant on Valentine's Day because I said to my husband, we haven't had sex in a while and we're definitely going to have sex on Valentine's Day. So give it up. And he did. So I know I got pregnant on Valentine's Day. Anyhow. So yeah, that last appointment, October 1st, they did a last sonogram and they were like, sis looks the same, baby looks great, lungs look completely developed, so we're not going to have to worry about giving you steroids for that. So let's look at the calendar. Okay, October 14th, 8 o'clock that morning, you check in to Harris Methodist Hospital in Fort Worth, and we'll have us a baby. And, I mean, from day I learned I was pregnant to the day they pulled my baby out cesarean section because they did not want me having any kind of contractions with that cyst because all the fluid in it was probably toxic and would have killed me and the baby. I knew I was pregnant for 3 months. So it was like super quick. My pregnancy was here and gone. But I loved being pregnant. I loved feeling my baby move around inside me. It was like the most amazing thing ever. And yeah. But yeah, so finish up. Checked into the hospital 8 o'clock that morning. They had me take a shower with a sterilizing soap. I'm not quite sure what's different from their soap to my own soap, but whatever. And then the nurses came in and they shaved the area where they were going to be cutting me open. And they wheeled me back to the operating room. They did an epidural because they wanted, if it was cancer and they needed to clean up any kind of other tumors or cancerous flesh or whatever, they wanted to be able to re-administer the anesthesia as needed in case they needed to be in there longer, which they can do with an epidural and they can't do with, like, say, a spinal block. And they wanted me to be awake for the baby, for me to be able to see the baby and whatnot. So yeah, they wheel me in and there's all these freaking nurses, like 3 or 4 nurses, and there's like 5 million pieces of surgery equipment on the freaking, I mean, this is scary as much freaking as like all these freaking scissors and stuff everywhere, and I'm just like, oh my god, are they gonna use all of that on me? um and then I had my high risk OBGYN, the head of the OBGYN department at the hospital, the oncologist, and a couple of students, because it's a teaching hospital, in the room all at the same time, plus the nurses, plus the anesthesiologist, plus my husband. It was a full house. And so they gave me the epidural, which sucked, by the way. I did not like getting the epidural. It's not that it hurt, because yes, it did hurt. I mean, they're sticking a freaking needle in your spine. It's the feeling of the needle going into my spine that just is like, oh my god. It was like a freaking parasite climbing into my oh, it was horrible. Oh, I hated it. Anyways, and then they tested me, they pushed down with a, can you feel that? No. Can you feel that? Yeah, I can feel that. Seeing where the line was, where the anesthesia ended. And then they put up this big curtain. I have this like big shiny thing on my hair. My husband's got it on his hair and his beard. The little booties on. And I remember going, damn it, I wish you'd cover up my bottom half. Because my freaking bottom half was just completely exposed. I could feel the cold air blowing on my hoo-ha, on my out, I guess I should use the proper term, the pubic majoris. And I'm like, man, I just wish my freaking, vagina wasn't just hanging out there. But I guess if I was having a natural birth, it would be even worse. So, whatever. And I felt giant pressure. I mean, I could feel it. Giant pressure push on me. And about that time, I started feeling really loopy. And I was like, I don't feel good. And the anesthesiologist was like, your blood pressure's dropped, and we're going to give you some medication. And it's from the epidural. It's really common side effect. We're going to give you something to counterbalance that. Give it a little bit. You'll be all right. And I was like, okay, I trust you, I guess, And I felt this big, giant pushing, and they're like, I was like, ooh, they're like, yeah, you're going to feel a lot of pressure here. And I was like, well, I wish you would have told me beforehand, goddamn. And then, hear this, and they're like, did you cut her? And I'm like, yeah, I think I did cut her. So they cut my daughter as they're opening up my uterus, I guess, because it's a blind cut. They can't see in there. I don't know exactly where it wasn't major. It was like a little nick, but they still cut her. And I was like, oh, my baby, And they're like, oh, she's trying to swim away. Apparently, she wasn't ready to come out yet. And then they pull her and they're like, oh, it's a girl. It's a girl. Or actually, they go, it's and then they stop for a minute and I'm like, oh my god, do I have a hermaphrodite? And the nurse is like, and the doctor was like, it's a girl. And she's like, it's a girl. And I guess she just couldn't tell because my hormones had made all of her stuff swell a whole bunch. So it was really inflamed. So I guess they couldn't tell it was a girl because of that. I don't know. I guess they thought maybe it was a really swollen penis, but she was definitely a girl. But anyhow, and then about, I want to say, I really don't know how long it was because, I'm sitting there going, oh, I want to see my baby. I want to see my baby. And they're like, hey, come over here. They got my husband and went over there. And he, after they washed her up and everything, and they're like, she looks great and all this stuff. And they bring her over and she's bright red. I mean, fire engine red with, a little bit of that, the birth goo on her. And he brings her over and he's looking at her and they hand her to me. And I'm like, oh, baby, baby. And then as I'm holding her, they go, congratulations, it's benign. So they tested the cyst right there in their operating room, which was like super cool. Although I didn't get although that's really the preliminary results because they can't really officially say it's not cancerous until they like examine every little piece of it or whatever. But they can do initial tests in the laboratory most of the time, like 99% of the time, it's gonna be benign, entirely. Although did have a friend who had her thyroid removed, and they said it was benign in the operating room, and then later it did come back as like stage 0 cancer. So, you know, anyhow, yeah, they're like, what are you gonna name her? And because we didn't want to know the sex, so we had names for both boys and girls. And we were like, oh, her name's going to be Serenity Ashland. And they're like, oh, that's so pretty. Where did you get that from? Like, well, when we first started dating, our very first date was watching this. My husband had asked me if I had seen Firefly, which is this sci-fi cowboy show, Western. And I was like, no. So we sat down and watched the Firefly as some of our very first dates. And when we were pregnant, we were watching the movie Serenity, which is based off of Firefly. And all of a sudden, my husband just kind of tilts his head and he goes, what about Serenity? It was a girl. And I was like, you know what? That's perfect. That's her name, Serenity Ashland.